Hello, everybody. My name is Jane, and I'll be introducing our digital library. Humans have always been fascinated by anatomy and what goes into our body's structure and its operation. Medical illustrations, particularly historic anatomical drawings, represent the confluence of artistic and scientific endeavors. Our group thought it would be valuable to pull together anatomical images from a variety of sources to explore the history of how professionals and laypeople understand the body's functioning. Many of the drawings were designed with the aim of helping surgeons and other medical professionals understand the work they did, like this picture of a bladder and the surrounding tissue, and also this picture of the inner workings of a human shoulder. We were initially interested in drawings from the 19th century, a time period when surgery was developing as a field, helped along by the invention of anesthesia in the 1840s and the growing understanding of sepsis and the importance of preventing infection. We later broadened the focus of our collection to include images of lungs and fetuses, um, and chose images that were created earlier than the 19th century. Understanding of anatomy has changed less over time than other biological fields. Works from the time period we were interested in are largely in the public domain, and we were able to find digitized images from a wide variety of international sources, including the United States Library of Medicine, National Library of Medicine, the University of Toronto Library, and other foreign collections. Images are so commonly digitized that it was actually difficult to find any libraries willing to let us scan print originals into our collection. We did find a few, including this illustration that we photographed from one of a first American edition of the iconic Gray's Anatomy guide. The same image was kept and reused in later editions of the instructional book. We spoke with Bob Vetrogoski, head of Rutgers History of Medicine collection, a special collection at the Newark Health Sciences campus. He's starting to think about digitizing his collection and is particularly interested in examining how explanatory text is fit into images by the artists that created them. For example, the text naming the ligaments and different muscles in the arm is put directly over the woodcut here, which was an innovation that didn't come along until the 19th century. In his digitization efforts, this librarian plans to follow the metadata standards of RUCORE, Rutgers' digital repository in progress. Future funding would allow us to partner with his efforts and expand our collection, as well as examine the possibility of using this RUCORE metadata standard. Many older anatomy books were created in partnership between doctors and artists who may have obtained the human bodies they dissected from executions or other nefarious means. We included 49 items in our collections. All are still images, and the illustrations were created using a variety of artistic techniques, from woodcut to lithographs, and including some color plates. At the time, at the time of their creation, images served educational, artistic, and medical purposes. The sizes of the images varied and reflected the use of larger works, the larger works they were a part of, whether they were parts of large atlases kept in a home or office, For example, this image of a pregnant woman, or smaller images that illustrated reference books medical students might take with them between classes and uh, and surgeries.
Hello everyone, I'm Ashley Ron, and I will be going over the metadata of our digital library. So as you can see, this is our homepage. These are a few of the items we have listed. Now, the items at the top are the drawings that we obtained from books, but some of the other ones are ones that we've obtained through various digital libraries, both domestic and international. As you can see, some of them are fairly simple to understand. The titles are in English. We use the Dubin format. Now these are all still images, so they all took pretty much the same Dublin Core standards. But due to the fact that we got these from so many different places, a lot of the information wasn't the same. Because a lot of the images that we have are so old, it wasn't easy to track down the original citations when other organizations were digitizing these items for the first time. So sometimes it was very easy to get confused with who the original publisher was and who the original source was, whether it was the person making the digital image of it or the original person who was responsible for creating the image in the first place. But these are generally the standards that we tried to have. Title, subject, description, creator, source, publisher, date, format, language, type, and identifier. When we had the information, we also tried to put the original format in. Because these images are so old, it was important to try to keep track of that information. We also put in bibliographic citations when available. Now, this is an example of one of the images that we used. This is from the College of Osteopathic Medicine in Philadelphia. So here, as you can see, they're following the Dublin Core format. So it tells you a little bit about the item. Now, the title is not in English. That's another issue I'll talk about a little more in a few minutes. But in this case, they did give a few good pieces of information. The original creator, so as you can see, it was Windler Jane, 1690 to 1759. So that's one of the instances where we have the original person. It also gives the original title of the book and the original image. But image is not in English, or the title of the book is not. And see, it also tells you the rights, the identifier. So this was a very helpful citation. This is something that we were really looking for, something that makes the transition of the information very easy. But that wasn't always the case. Now, as you can see, this is an example of another library we took the information from. This is the University of Toronto Library. So this just has the technique the images were collected in, a few of the subjects, scope and content, perhaps a few elements that are similar to Dublin Core, but clearly it was following its own standard of metadata. So when we took images from places like this, we really had to try to figure out what correlated with the Dublin Core elements. That could be tricky. So another big issue that we had was the titles with things that were in different languages. It wasn't always clear what exactly the image we were looking at was, and that language sure didn't help. And it didn't help that sometimes it wouldn't be clear if it was talking about an author or a title. So we just had to try to figure it out as best as we could as we went on. Now, one of the things with metadata in here that we have that's really user-friendly is the tags. So not every item that we have in here is tagged, but a few of the things are. So we tried to group our categories based on different anatomical items. So for example, we have a lot of images of fetuses and lungs. So we added individual tags to each of the photos of fetuses and lungs. So when you go to fetuses, all of the images of the fetuses will appear. So for anyone using this library, That's a very handy feature. It makes it so they don't have to sort through all the images because we do have up to almost 50 images on here. So it can be really difficult to find what you're looking for. And also we have the lungs here. And see, you get an automatic image of it. And this is also really helpful because of the language barrier again, because even if you typed in the name lungs with a few of these, see, this is all in a completely different language. The original title wouldn't show up. So it was up to us to assign subject categories. But clearly this is a picture of a lung as you look in.
Hi, I'm Larry, and I'm going to talk about some of the observations we had about the project. First of all, some of the challenges that we faced have already been mentioned. Ashley talked about the metadata, and that was by far our biggest challenge. We had problems with the documents themselves, in that many of them were in the foreign languages. Sometimes there were no titles at all, and in those cases, we had to create our own titles and would put them in brackets, like this example here. Or sometimes the titles had pretty uninteresting names, like this one, which was called Top Half First Page. It was part of a fold-out that came in a book. So this is the top half of the first page of the illustration. Other times we would have to invent the titles, such as here, where we added arteries of torso because it was just called plate 54. So titles were part of a problem. Sometimes we had documents that did not have illustrators, and we would have to make those anonymous. It was difficult to identify a creator in some case because we wanted to recognize the artist rather than the physician that was behind the creation of the illustration. There was also problems with collecting the metadata on formats. We weren't always sure what a document was, whether it was a pencil illustration or an ink illustration or a lithograph. So those were issues that we had. And in many of the documents, we didn't know exactly what the size of the original was. And that's one of the things that is expected in the metadata. So our metadata was incomplete, and we were often guessing. And then there was just a problem of consistency. With us spread out and working in different parts of the country and working with different documents from different sources, we interpreted things differently. And when we realized that, we had to go back and make our metadata a little more consistent. So that was certainly one of the problems. I think one of the strengths is that we ended up creating a really fascinating collection. I mean, I already showed you this. I think it's just an amazing illustration. Some of the illustrations are creepy, like this one from Grey's Anatomy. Some of the illustrations are quite beautiful. The portraiture on this is amazing, even though that we're really supposed to be looking at his throat and upper chest. We can't help but be impressed by the beauty of his face and the detail in the hair and so on. So it's a fascinating collection of documents, and that's something that we're really proud of. And creepy too, which is also sort of fun. As far as things that we learned, we certainly learned that Dublin Core is useful, in part because it is so generic, but that same quality also made it subject to various interpretations, and that's where we ran into the problem with consistency, where we were using different labels in the Dublin Core to mean different things. I mentioned creator was a problem. Initially, some of us were using the original creator, and some of us were using the digitizer as the creator, so we had to go back and make those things consistent. And then another problem that we had, as Jane mentioned, it was difficult to find print sources to scan, which is one of the things that we had hoped to do on our own. If we had $1 million, well, there's a lot of great stuff that's out there that's already been digitized. This is from the U.S. National Library of Medicine in cooperation with the National Institute of Health. And you can see that they've got this site called Dream Anatomy that has all kinds of different anatomical illustrations that are just amazing. There's also a library in London. It's called Welcome Images. That is a collection of all kinds of images, but one of the things that they do is have anatomical illustrations, and so that's another great source. But we are sure that there are collections out there, especially in Europe, and we found a lot of illustrations coming from Italy or France or Belgium. We would love to go to some of the archives of these illustrations and digitize items that have not yet been digitized. Some of the original early 19th century documents we think would be pretty fascinating to add to our collection. So if we had $1 million, that's probably one of the things that we would do is go around the world and digitize some of the important anatomical illustrations and add them to the already impressive collection that is available online. So those are some of the things that we learned during the process of creating this project, and we hope you enjoy it.